So we're in part 3 of the Empress Wu series by Extra History, and this one's called Bloody Ghost and Riots.
Chang'an, China, 657 CE. Wu Zetian, Empress of China, sees faces in the mirror behind her. She drops the bronze tray she's carrying. And slowly, she turns. It is them, again. Both of them. Empress Wang and pure consort Xiao, floating above the floor. They have no legs, and blood blossoms on their robes. Their hair, long and unkempt, hangs disheveled, and bruises mark their throats. They say nothing. They never do. They don't need to. Their eyes say it all. How she had them banished to the interior of the palace, confined in a windowless room with only a slit for food. Unable to wash or clean for months, these two former rivals walled up together. And when the emperor had stumbled upon them and considered granting them mercy, Wu had sent her men to give them 100 lashes before hanging them. And now, they appear to remind her of a terrifying fact. Where she is, they once were, and it'll only take one slip for her to join them.
So does she have like PTSD? Is that what it's implying there? Ugh. Yeah. You know what that kind of reminds me of? There are accounts of the Assyrian Empire, an empire renowned for its cruelty. And there are actually accounts from like soldiers and stuff of seeing the ghost of those who they've killed. So like, and I think it's been like cited as a source for PTSD even being around in much ancient times, like kind of like an early, probably one of the earliest examples of that. I don't know, that kind of just reminded me of that. Which would imply that, you know, like, there's definitely some type of, like, guilt or remorse in terms of just killing people or being responsible for death. I wonder if that was a real antidote or not, or... I don't know, like, that's the thing with these sources, huh? Like, who's writing them? Is it Wu herself having influence, or is it someone who hates her? Like, that's kind of the thing, like, it's almost like, what do you trust? But, if true, that would imply some type of guilt or lingering regret, maybe for her actions, I don't know. Or maybe just stress of, maybe it's just the stress of knowing you can't be replaced and that your position is never secured, huh? I'd imagine even though she's won in a sense, she realizes, oh snap, I can be replaced, and maybe that stress is getting to her. I mean, it would get to me, I think. Like, you're never safe no matter what you do, you know?
Today's haunting historical tale is made possible by our creator-owned and operated streaming service Nebula, where you can actually watch our next episode in this series right after this one, which is like a full week earlier than here on YouTube. But more on that after the episode. When Wu was declared Empress Consort in 655, it wasn't just the two dull points on the love triangle that had to go. She had a whole list of enemies to deal with. Chief among them were those advisors her husband, Emperor Gaozong, had inherited from his father. Older aristocrats who'd fought and founded the Tang dynasty and tried to prevent her becoming empress. And Wu's supporters, mostly young scholars that gained their positions through the public examination system, absolutely hated them. But at first, she waited, and the moves she did make were subtle. For instance, enemies were not punished, but promoted, just to posts that did not suit them or which were far away from court. And then, stuff started to happen. Like the secret police catching officials in secret societies and torturing them until they gave up the names of their treacherous co-conspirators. Names that, inevitably, were those of officials who had opposed Wu. The real watershed moment, though, came when one of the old guard officials tried to hit back. See, he had learned that Wu's supporter, Cat Li, aka the Sword in the Smile, had bribed a beautiful prisoner out of jail to be his mistress. Of course, this official took this report of corruption straight to the emperor. But by the time Wu was done, Cat Li was cleared of charges, and it was the whistleblower who was exiled. That kicked off the full purge. Through gossip, insinuation, and half-true reports from secret police, the emperor's powerful advisors were exiled, and most chose to take their own lives. Often, though, if they were hesitant, their captors very nicely helped. In fact, sometimes the emperor would call someone in to answer for charges, only to find out that, wouldn't you know, on the way, they had confessed to being a super traitor and were immediately executed. Hate when that happens.
Oh boy. Yeah, again, like there's a bit of ruthlessness, as I keep saying, but like you need to, right? And like Wu's playing this game and on the quest to secure even more power. You gotta get rid of all rivals. Like even especially in the past, like you kind of had to just kind of kill everybody, huh? We've seen it a lot to secure your place, to get rid of rivals, killing, imprisoning, etc. Again, like it's something that just happened a lot in history, and it's just so interesting to just see how Wu is just like dismantling all of her rivals, both in in I guess the concubine court and even like outside of that. She's like great at playing this game, by the way, the game of politics, as I call it. She's amazing.
Soon, even Emperor Gaozong's previous heir was stashed at a border post, and Wu's eldest son named Crown Prince. But these court battles did take a psychological toll on Wu. She felt particularly sharp guilt over the deaths of Empress Wang and Consort Xiao, evidenced by the sources claiming she dreamed nightly that their ghosts haunted her dreams, mutely staring at her in their soiled robes. Supposedly, this was the impetus for Wu and Gaozong to move the capital from Chang'an, instead resituating it in Luoyang, 200 miles to the east. And for the next 50 years, Wu would rule there, only rarely going back to Chang'an. Though when she did return, she stayed in a brand new palace she ordered constructed. Now, of course, there were other reasons to move the court other than the spooky, scary skeletons in Wu's closet. Luoyang was better tied into trade networks, and it was closer to Korea, where Chinese armies were fighting to keep a foothold on the peninsula, just across the Yellow Sea. Meanwhile, imperial armies were also battling Turkic tribes in Central Asia to keep control of the Silk Road and expand Chinese territory in the area. This was the time that the Tang was at its greatest territorial extent, and the strain was starting to show, especially on Emperor Gaozong. Always sickly, the emperor began to experience constant headaches and vision loss that stole his ability to read. At first, this was just a nuisance, but then in 660, Gaozong collapsed and was unable to rise, with doctors attending to his bedchamber. Wu, remaining behind a curtain of beads and pearls, as was customary for women in official settings, looked on in horror as the doctor suggested bleeding Gaozong. At this, she flew into a rage, screaming that it was treason, and if anyone were to cut the emperor, they would die. Stopping only when Gaozong told her they were only trying to do their jobs. Then, when the bleeding appeared to help, a distraught Wu emerged from the curtain in a stunning break of protocol and, apologizing through tears, gave the doctors jewels off her own arms. Now, her reaction here can be read a number of ways. After all, this man was not only her access to power, but also the one shielding her from enemy reprisal. Yet it also may speak to Wu's genuine affection for Gaozong, with the pair being unusually close. Though even...
Honestly, it can be a bit of both. Like, you know, like I don't think it has to be one or the other. I think it can be a bit of both. Like, probably actual genuine care, but at the same time, like, she kind of needs him around, you know, to continue doing what she's doing. So I think it's a bit of both pragmatism and genuine affection. And a bit earlier, like, apparently, like, if true, if she actually was feeling that guilty about killing her rivals, even to the point of seeing their ghost, then yeah, that would imply, like, definitely Wu has a lot more humanity than the stories of her brutality, right? Would imply, I think. So, yeah.
That was turned against her, as due to Wu's frequent time in the bedroom with her husband, she was sometimes cast as a sort of vitality-sucking sex vampire, you know, draining his male power and making him sick.
You know, that's kind of the thing with powerful women in history. Like, there's all slander against them. Like, think of Cleopatra, for instance. You know, the famous Cleopatra and Mark Antony, where Cleopatra is often portrayed as some, like, exotic seductress who turned the good Roman Mark Antony into, like, you know, a puppet of hers, and, you know, she used him, and, you know, like that. Like, oftentimes in history, like, I guess it's threatening, especially when a woman gets power, considering of how rare it is. So, like, it kind of threatens the balance of the of just how things are done, you know? And often it'll just resort to calling them like witches or calling them like seductresses, calling them like just more evil. I think women can often get more slander than even men, at least from what you've seen. Because, like, Cleopatra, the more I learn about her, she was just a really great ruler. Like, Oversimplified's video about Cleopatra is one of my favorites. No, not oversimplified. Overly sarcastic productions. I'm sorry. They both have overly. But, overly sarcastic productions of Cleopatra is probably one of my favorite videos that really changed my perspective on her. Seeing her, like, definitely as a great ruler in her own way for Egypt, one who actually cared. So, like, a part of me almost thinks that Wu has gotten that exact same treatment, and that this series so far is definitely making the perspective change and seeing that, like, no, there's way more to it than that, though obviously she had to be, kind of a bit ruthless in terms of getting rid of her enemies and maneuvering through the court. That's kind of expected, like, anyone would have to do that to survive, so a different time, and just you had to do what you had to do to survive, man.
Anyway, finding it difficult to manage the constant flow of petitioners and officials wanting decisions, Gaozong began to rely heavily on Wu for advice. She would sit beside him behind her modesty screen and whisper what rulings he should make. This burden removed, he started to attend less and less to everyday tasks. And through her husband, Wu began to make policy. She banned women from burlesque performances and reorganized the ranking system of imperial concubines, removing references to gender so it was on par with the rank system for palace officials. Now, some say this was to prevent any concubines from outshining her, but others argue it was an acknowledgement that women of the harem were not just pretty playthings, but performed a vital role in the civil service. Most crucially, however, she managed the war in Korea, choosing generals and launching a new expedition into northern Korea.
I wanted to earn a top-rated degree in
While Wu was the power behind the throne, her position was precarious. Perhaps that's why, after Gaozong recovered sufficiently to take back over some of his duties, she then engaged the Taoist sorcerer to help her control the emperor through magical means. This, of course, was the same crime that had led to Empress Wang and consort Xiao's fall, and indeed, when Gaozong found out, it was the closest their ghosts came to getting revenge. The order of demotion and expulsion was in Gaozong's hand when Wu heard of it, and came running to his chambers, begging him not to go through with it. Once again, she worked her charm, and in the end, it actually was the officials that drew up those papers that ended up on the scaffold.
Oh, wow.
That was the last major
Dang, that was a close call. That's interesting that she would kind of resort to that, because you think, like, maybe staying away from any witchcraft or stuff like that is probably, or sorcery rather, would probably be, like, the top of the list of what not to do, but I guess desperation, right? She kind of doesn't want to lose her influence and whatnot.
Resistance to Wu's rule over Gaozong. As his health took another downswing, the emperor once again increasingly leaned on Wu to make decisions. Soon, when officials came to him with policy issues, his first question was if they'd asked the empress. And given Gaozong's decline, it was clear that Wu must have been thinking about the realities of succession. Her husband was slowly dying, and her sons still relatively young. She needed to secure her position, and decided that she would use religion to do it. Wu began pushing for her title to be upgraded, for if her husband was the son of heaven, ruling via divine favor, surely she then was the Heaven Empress. Lunar New Year, 666 CE, Mount Tai. It is the sacrifice to heaven and earth, a set of rituals so expensive they've not been conducted for 600 years. For a full day, the Pale Gaozong does what emperors have done before him, making offerings to his imperial ancestors, walking to the summit, and burying 2 enormous jade slabs there to report his dynasty's success to heaven. The cold mountain wind carries incense smoke away into the sky. Ambassadors from every corner of the empire watch, along with shackled prisoners of war, whose spirits soon will be ritually offered to the gods before they're released. And that's when the tradition changes, because when those rituals are complete and the procession returns to the mountain base, the sacrifices to Earth begin. For centuries, the emperor conducted these as well, but not today. Just before the rituals begin, Empress Wu pointed out that while heaven is suffused with male yang energy, the earth was a female yin element, and therefore must be conducted by women. Gaozong and his court leave, clearing the area, as the Heaven Empress Wu and her court ladies share a symbolic banquet of food and wine with the earth, usurping the most powerful ritual in all of Chinese religion.
Wow. Even the use of her maneuvering through these customs is interesting. Like I said, I'm a little not a little. I'm very ignorant of these. Didn't even know this was a ritual that, you know, Chinese emperors did. So that's already just unique, and the way she's like positioning herself into being more prominent in all walks. Not first it was the court, next it's politics, next is the emperor, and now here the religious customs. Like she's ingraining herself so deep into just like all these different facets of like China, and just kind of like making herself so much more powerful symbolically and, you know, practically as well. It really is just, again, a very just intelligent person.
And Wu would not stop there, because the Heaven Empress would only grow in power, and soon the heavens, the earth, and even the monasteries of the Buddha would be within her grasp. And you can go watch our episode on that next chapter of Wu's life right now.
And I'm about to, because we're about to jump to part 4. I'll see you guys tomorrow when we do that.